all of his metrics grayed out prior to his 23rd birthday as absolutely superstar level potential and possibly low level MVP candidate potential. This is before 23.
And if he just focused more of his energy on defense, and then also he can shoot threes.
This guy is legitimately like a basketball savant in terms of his talent.
I don't think it's unreasonable to call them the title favorite in the East.
This is just going to be a crazy conversation. I acknowledge that. It's fine. I feel super confident about this. This is a series we call Hot Hand Minis. These are shorter form pod episodes where Geoff and I get together to discuss a single topic. And we have a really fun topic for you guys today. We are each going to tell you, I should say, because we have a couple different names in mind, ahead of time, who will be the next NBA superstar in the league. We will be using data and all of our tools for analysis. A few ground rules first, though, Geoff, because you can be sneaky sometimes. We gotta set the ground rules. You and I did a guest appearance on the NBA podcast with our buddy Jack Quantrill from the Drop Step, who he's been hosting it, and we talked about players who would make their first ever All NBA team. So for our discussion today, we'll make it consistent. We have to choose someone who has never made an All NBA team. So this is going to be someone who will be a superstar as soon as this season, but has yet to make any All-NBA team, even a third All-NBA team. And listen, in this video, Geoff and I, we're going to both say a bunch of shit that you'll disagree with, but we'd love to hear from you. Leave comments with your thoughts. Who do you think will be the next NBA superstar, given the parameters that we've mentioned? We respond to every single comment, so we'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions. Geoff, anything else you want to say before we get started?
No, I think you always do a great job of leading in. I think everybody agrees with that. That's why they keep watching. It's for your intros and for your editing skills. Subscribe for XJ's editing skills. I'll add that. click the subscribe button for us.
If people are watching and listening to an NBA podcast for editing skills, I'd suggest you. I won't suggest you go elsewhere. Keep doing that. That'd be cool, but I doubt it's happening. But I appreciate it nonetheless, Geoff. You're always so complimentary.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody else you're complimentary of is your pick for who will be the next NBA superstar in the league. Who are you going with, Geoff?
So I just want to be clear about one thing. Everybody's going to be like, oh, Wemby. We were also going for guys who might be flying under the radar on the national spectrum. So yes, we all agree that Victor Wembanyama, Wemby the Yama man, as we call him here on Hot Hand Theory, we all agree he's going to be great. I don't think anybody is really interested in a 15-minute conversation about why Wemby's going to be great. We all get it. My pick is Tyrese Maxey. And I think a lot of people are sleeping on how good Maxey's been and kind of how much low-hanging fruit there is for him to get even better. And so we're going to talk about him for a little bit. But I'm going to toss it back to you, XJ, even though he's not my pick. What are your thoughts on Maxey? I don't need you to dive in. I have some data and I have some stuff because he was my pick. But when we talked about this on the side, and then also when we talked about this on the NBA pod, you seemed not down on him, but maybe not quite as high. And I'm curious what that stems from, what you don't like about him, and maybe that can help, not strengthen my perspective, but illuminate how I feel about him, because I respect your opinion so much.
Yeah, so I would say I'm definitely not down on Maxey. I know when we've talked about him, I think it might come across that way, but I think that's just because I don't see him as a superstar in this tier of one of the best players in the NBA. I do see him as an all-star candidate, somebody who can be fighting for an all-star spot, even in a loaded, Eastern Conference in terms of the guards. But I guess I just don't see him elevating into that tier with guys like Brunson and Halliburton, and that's kind of where I'm at. I could see him being potentially on the Donovan Mitchell level, potentially maybe the Ja Morant kind of tier like that, but even then, that I think to me that's the argument for Maxey. So I love Maxey as a player, but it's not really about his skill set. The guy is ridiculous. He is an elite, efficient three-point shooter when he has everything together, and he's taking more catch and shoot shots than pull-up shots. Great shooter, impossible speed. Nobody can keep up with the guy. You can't stay in front of him. And he's getting better and better, each season. So And we've seen what he can do. You know, I'm sure you'll go into all of this. We've seen what he can do when he's kind of leading an offense with Embiid not there. So I think he's great. I just think the opportunity is the thing I'm concerned about for Maxey, with Embiid soaking up so much of the usage there, everything running through Embiid. He's going to be the primary guy. The guy has insane usage every year. I don't remember what it's like, in the mid 30s or maybe even high 30s for usage for Joel Embiid. So that's just, those are crazy numbers. And yeah, if we see, you know, a downturn from Embiid kind of soon, I think that's the opportunity that Maxey has. But at the same time, we've seen kind of the Embiid playing with other stars from the USA basketball. It's just a little bit concerning. I think Embiid needs things to run through him to be his most effective. And Maxey's a guy who can play a little off a little bit more. But that to me is limiting in terms of his ability to be like, you know, an engine, a guy who is going to be perceived and seen as a superstar, having superstar impact. I think all of that stuff is questionable to me because he's playing with Embiid. If he was in a different situation, he and Paul George were together, I think that'd be awesome. But you throw Embiid in there, and I just feel like the opportunity is not really there. That's my only concern about Maxey.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with a lot of that. I'm not sure that from a national consensus standpoint, when we get to the end of next season, people are going to view Maxey the way they view guys you alluded to, Mitchell, Brunson, Halliburton. And I do agree with you that as long as Embiid is there, Embiid's going to be the guy. Now let's get into a few of the reasons why I'm bullish on Maxey making that leap and potentially being in that conversation. It really comes down to a couple things. And those things are thing you pointed out: opportunity, role, surrounding players, and his age. So let's get into the role. If you look at the data about his efficiency, he shot 43% from three and then 43.2% from three in 2022 and 2023. That dipped to 37.3% in 2024. But the percent that he was assisted on of those threes went from 71 and 72.5% to 60%. Took a huge dip without James Harden and then with Embiid leaving. I think that Embiid's going to come back next season, and they're replacing Tobias Harris with Paul George. So I think the paradigm that Maxey exists in is going to be a lot closer to his 2022-2023 paradigm than it is going to be to his 2024 paradigm. But I think there are two things in play here. I think Paul George is not James Harden. I don't think he needs the ball in his hands nearly as much as James Harden does. And I think Embiid is going to take a slight back seat next year in an attempt to be at his most healthy in the playoffs that we've ever seen. I think the Sixers have reached a point where they recognize that the only thing that matters is a championship. I think that in the regular season, it's not going to be Maxey's team. It's going to be Embiid's team still, but I do think his usage is going to take it's going to go down just a little bit. So it's kind of going to be this collaboration of all these different ideas for Maxey. Like, he's going to be more of an engine, but he's also going to be operating in a more conducive paradigm to success than he was last year when he was an engine. So I think we could see his true shooting percentage and his overall efficiency go up, but also his volume get closer to or approximate his 2024 season. It's kind of going to be a middle ground of all these really good things that we've seen in the last few seasons, and they're going to come together. And this brings me to his age. He's 24 years old. There's some natural progression that's available for him. Again, if you look at the data, he was just in the 39th percentile and the 28th percentile from the mid-range and at the rim. Those are not super good at all. But Maxey's an incredible free throw shooter, an incredible shooter, very athletic, very good getting downhill. I know he doesn't have much of a left hand, but there's just no reason for him to be this inefficient at the rim and from the mid-range. I think he's a lot better than he's shown. I think it's very easy to imagine him improving in both of these areas. You combine all these things, his career high true shooting percentage is just over 60. Last season, it was 57, as I mentioned, it was 58. As I've mentioned before, there are all these things, all these factors that went into why he got a little bit less efficient overall. I think his overall efficiency is going to skyrocket. I think his true shooting might be as high as 63% next season if he gets even normal three-point luck. And all of this is going to combine to, in my opinion, him having the best offensive season of his entire career.
Yeah, I think that's a strong case, and I could totally see it. I think the thing that sticks out to me the most in some of what you implied is we probably don't see Embiid for definitely not more than 65 games, in my opinion. He's probably going to be around that if he's reasonably healthy. And then, Paul George did play a ton last year, but he is going into his year 34 season. And so I think we can expect him to rest a bit as well. All of those situations do give Maxey a lot of the opportunity. And I agree with you as far as his improvement. I think this is a guy who I expect to be a better finisher around the rim. He didn't shoot well from the mid-range last season, but he is a good mid-range shooter, and I think he'll kind of turn that around with more space, operating off of a guy like Paul George a lot more. And yeah, I think he can be the complete package, honestly, at least offensively, I'll say. I definitely have concerns about his defense, but I think they did surround basically all of the Sixers with a pretty solid defensive team, as well as like some good spacing to go around them. I guess my question to you would be, so you have Maxey is kind of taking this big ascension, this big leap, which I think it's a fair argument and it makes sense, your reasoning for sure. Then we have Embiid, coming off of when he was healthy last season, was clearly, I think we both agreed, was clearly the most valuable player in the league, even more valuable than Jokic and Doncic at the time. And then you have Paul George coming off his best season, one of his best seasons in a long time, and one of his best three-point shootings, if not his best three-point shooting season of his career. So basically, I feel like you effectively have the Sixers having like three highly synergistic superstars all together with strong role guys around them. Do you have the Sixers like winning the championship? Because I feel like if all those things came true, how would they be beaten?
They would be beaten if they have poor injury luck, which is very live. But yeah, I think that if Maxey breaks out, like I think he's going to, and that correlates with George and Embiid. You mentioned them resting by missing games. I think they're going to rest a little bit during the games too. I don't think they're going to take on the roles they've taken in the past. And I think this is going to correlate with their health luck improving throughout the season. If George and Embiid are ready to go for the playoffs and Maxey takes a leap, I don't think it's unreasonable to call them the title favorite in the East. I think it's close, at least between them, Boston, and the Knicks. I don't like to speak in absolutes. I'm not going to like guarantee a Philly title. That's silly. Of course, you understand that. But for
no,
people,
just like healthy favorite. Like you would have them.
But
as the
I do think,
favorite.
I think they're one of, if not the favorites, if these things all occur. Another thing I want to mention about Maxey that I don't think enough people talk about. When people talk about him, they talk about his shooting, they talk about his speed. Last year without Harden and with Embiid going down, his overall usage just spiked. And something you often see when somebody's usage goes up, in Maxey's case going up from 23% to 27.5%, you see their efficiency go down like Maxey's did. But you also see as a playmaker, they turn it over more. They become a little bit more sporadic with the ball because you're more predictable. And just when you carry more of a usage, you're operating tired more. These are things you often see. Maxey's assist percentage went from 16.6% to 26%, which put him in the 87th percentile, but his turnover percent went down. That's crazy. That's just a sign of a really, really skilled player, someone who's really comfortable carrying a heavy burden. And so if Maxey's usage is going to, middle off a little bit more, I think he grew as a playmaker, and this is going to help his overall impact. But he's going to, again, instead of Tobias Harris being off the ball, it's going to be Paul George. It's going to be Joel Embiid maybe playing a little bit more of an off-ball role. These things are all going to help Maxey grow into this role as maybe the de facto primary option from the perimeter for Philly for a really, really good offense. And this all added up to everybody, when they think about Philly, you look at that postseason series last year, they got absolutely decimated when Embiid didn't play. He's almost like, I'm not going to say he is Jokic, but he has this reputation when he plays of being a guy who, when Embiid's on the court, Philly thrives. When Embiid's off the court, they get crushed. Well, during the regular season last year, the Sixers won the team's minutes when Maxey when Maxey played and Embiid didn't. And the offense was 6 points better per 100 when Maxey played and Embiid didn't versus when Embiid played and Maxey didn't. So we're seeing this guy become a very, very important focal point for this team. Again, at least as far as the offense goes.
I think you just mentioned what, to me, from a data perspective, from Maxey's statistical profile, is the most impressive thing to me. And I'm so glad you pointed it out, because I don't think you could underrate what you just said a couple minutes ago, which is that his assist percentage went from 16.6 to 25.7, and his turnover percentage went down. Not only did his assist percentage go up, but also his usage went up from 23.7 to 27.4. That is crazy, to get that much more usage and to be tasked with that much more creation responsibility, and for your turnover percentage to still go down. He's already one of the best point guard turnover guys in the NBA. That is really a flashing bulb to me in terms of what his potential is, with his decision making, with his efficiency of passing, and his all of that stuff combined. I think that it's definitely a strong case for Maxey.
Yeah, I think he's just gonna be great. It's difficult to talk about because it's so many not conflicting, but it's so many different variables that I'm being very generous with trying to, his usage is going to go down here, but that's a good thing because X. And, so I'm kind of cherry picking from a number of different ideas. I buy that, but I do think there is a world where all of this aligns and his overall offensive impact is just through the roof, because I do think that there's also a world, I have to be fair and I have to, respect the dissenting viewer, or respect the, acknowledge that I might not be right. I have to acknowledge that there's a chance that Embiid just shows up next year and he's the same Embiid, and Maxey has to just play more of a supporting role, and your skepticism about his overall impact is warranted. I just think there's a really, really good player here. And at the core of my belief is I think it would be best for Philly if Maxey has this sort of breakout year. If Embiid and George were we've got a 24-year-old star here who can stay healthy and who can carry the burden. Embiid might not win MVP, but all of a sudden you've got Embiid operating as his best self in the playoffs. You've got Paul George staying healthy through the season, and you've got Maxey in these offensive player of the year. You've got him in these all NBA discussions. I think that is the outcome where Philly is in championship discussions.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. We'll definitely see if Embiid is able to take on some of that role, as some of that backseat in spurts here and there. And to me, that's the biggest question mark. I didn't feel necessarily really encouraged by his USA performance this summer, and that's a little bit of what I've been worried about from Embiid. How is he going to age when things don't always run through him, when he doesn't have a 39 usage like he did last season, which is insane. But yeah, we'll see. I do think if he can scale down a little bit, that would be best for them, and then Maxey would absolutely have the shot that you're talking about.
It is wild to me because, and this isn't a criticism of Embiid, because when he's been healthy, he's been an incredible player. But you know how people used to talk about LeBron getting older and how he could just be a supersized Draymond Green. That'll be 40-year-old LeBron when he can't be a perimeter option. Somewhere underneath Embiid, there's a souped up Dwight Howard. There's someone who focuses 75% of his energy on defensive impact because he's such a mammoth around the basket. He can just change the course of opposing offenses' efficiencies by just being there because he's such a force. And if he just focused more of his energy on defense, and then also he can shoot threes. He has a positive gravity just by existing on offense. He doesn't need to have this crazy usage. He can just run pick and pop, stand on the perimeter, play off ball more. All of a sudden his injury risk goes down. His offensive impact is still high because, again, he's a good shooter and he's helping the defense more. That is a worse version of this player. I feel like that is how he could age more gracefully and not be as much of an injury risk. And I wonder if they are open to that at all. If Embiid would be open to that, I do feel like that would be good for him, for his longevity at least.
It's a great point and a great question. I think something we should explore, on a deeper level in a future episode for sure, because there's a lot to unpack there. Somebody that I think that kind of 3-and-D Embiid would go well with is the guy who I think is going to be the next NBA superstar. I think the next NBA superstar is going to be LaMelo Ball. And to me, I feel like super confident about this. I think there's only one thing that could stop this from happening, and that's his ankle injuries. He needs to talk to Steph and figure out what he needs to do to prevent this from being a long-term issue in his career. But, I've always liked LaMelo since his rookie season, but the more I pour into the numbers and the film, this guy is legitimately like a basketball savant in terms of his talent. Like, I don't know. Like, I mean, this is just gonna be a crazy conversation. I acknowledge that. It's fine. I'm gonna say things that sound crazy. I think he's like on the level of like a Luka Doncic in terms of his basketball savantness. Like, okay, the obvious problem is he's only played 58 games the last 2 seasons, so it's super easy to forget about him. But let's start with the metrics. So across the last 3 years where he's played 133 games, he's never been lower than the 94th percentile in offensive EPM and the 87th percentile in overall EPM. Same span of time for LeBron, the other impact metrics we really care about. He's never been lower than 95th percentile in offensive LeBron, never lower than 88th percentile in overall LeBron. This is a guy who's turning 23 this month, or I think he turned 23 this month. It hasn't even really got real NBA reps yet. 538's Raptor, it's pretty much defunct now, but 2 years ago, they had this projection tool. And the tool had him projected as an eventual MVP candidate. Basically, also, to go along with that MVP candidacy projection, his lowest point within the middle 80% prediction interval was basically the equivalent of a wins above replacement or a WAR as Julius Randle's We Here season. So that's where he led the Knicks to the 4th seed in the East. So just making that more clear, because that was a lot of words. In normal human terms, let's just say that's basically saying that there's a 90% chance that the absolute worst case scenario for LaMelo Ball for his career is for his peak to be as impactful as that Julius Randle season. That's the worst case scenario. That's not the best case scenario. That's the least likely thing to happen, but it won't be worse than that. So all of his metrics grade out to prior to his 23rd birthday as absolutely superstar level potential and possibly low level MVP candidate potential. This is before 23. I'm going to go on. Passing. Why do I think he's going to be so good? I think he's really going to be an offensive engine, the level of a Tyrese Halliburton, and potentially better because of his size and because, honestly, just frankly, he's a better passer than Tyrese Halliburton. Like, a lot of people have this idea Halliburton's like a quote-unquote, he's a system point guard or whatever. Anyone could be him if they were in that role. I think that's ridiculous. That's a wild opinion to me. However, if LaMelo was in that Halliburton role, I could imagine him and the Pacers being actually even better. I looked at some B-ball index numbers in terms of passing creation quality. So that's looking at the quality of shots that result from his passes and passing versatility. LaMelo absolutely trounces Tyrese Halliburton. He can make more passes and set guys up for easier shots. The place where Halliburton destroys him is in his passing efficiency. Halliburton is a much lower turnover guy. And, that's probably, in my opinion, because of a combination of, guys not being as open on the Hornets, LaMelo not taking easy passes because he's so gifted that he thinks he can make the most insane passes into insanely small windows, and he does. But I do think his aggression and risk level can be addressed throughout his career. And then, to me, just the overall point here is that he's just a truly unique talent in terms of his passing ability. And I think that's going to make him one of the elite offensive engines in the game, in the school of Trae Young, Tyrese Halliburton, Luka Doncic, spread pick and roll basketball. To belabor the point, I'm gonna stop talking in a second, but I'm gonna just mention an anecdote. Basically, there was this play where LaMelo takes a dribble between his legs from the right to left. I was watching some LaMelo film. He takes a dribble between his legs from right to left, and in the motion of the dribble, he throws like a left-handed scoop pass from the right wing to the left corner that hits the shooter literally in their shooting pocket. And he does this all no look because he's staring at his teammate on the left wing, basically to misdirect the defense. It's ridiculous. Like maybe I'll put a clip in here for the audience to see. This is like a level of passing that I think only like Luka Doncic could achieve. He throws the basketball literally like a baseball, like a football, like a bowling ball. You know, he has those underhanded full court passes. He has every arm angle, like Matt Stafford, Pat Mahomes kind of thing. He can put velocity on it with both hands. I just think with some improvement in his decision making, he'll be the second best passer or best passer in the NBA probably within the next like 2 years. I have more to say, but I'm going to stop there because I could just ramble about LaMelo for like an hour. But I want to get your thoughts, some feedback, so far.
I mean, the thing I like the most about projecting his upside, well, there's two things actually. And it's gonna sound similar to what we were talking about with Maxey, but team situation, the team is his. So like if he stays healthy and he makes the improvement he does, the sky is the limit for there's nothing getting in his way. Like I know Brandon Miller's they value him, but I think that Miller, they're seeing, and correctly, as more of a Paul George two-way off-ball type. He does some cool things off the ball. He can be interactive with LaMelo, and with LaMelo taking on a Halliburton, Trae Young, Helio type profile. And then the second thing, and again, I said something similar with Maxey, there's some low-hanging fruit here for the guy. He's never had an above-average true shooting percentage ever. And this is despite him clearly being a good free throw shooter, clearly being a fine three-point shooter, and having the size to, get to the rim and be a good finisher. There's no reason for him to be below average efficiency. There's every reason to expect, if the team starts caring about winning more, or he starts, he just makes an improvement in terms of his shot mapping. If he gets, 56, 55% true shooting up and closer to 60 or above 60, that right there is just pretty low hanging fruit in terms of offensive impact. And we talk about him at the rim. Dude, he's never been above the 20th percentile in efficiency at the rim. This is a 6'8" guard who's immensely skilled. That has to go up. It almost has to. And then his turnover percentage, you just mentioned his decision making. Look, when you carry a usage that high, turnovers are going to come. Not everybody can be a Tyrese Maxey or a Jalen Brunson type who's just never turns it over in spite of carrying a high usage. But of course, his decision making can get better. So, yeah, I mean, I like LaMelo Ball as a player a lot. I think the thing that would have me hesitant would be I'm just not sure what direction the Hornets want to go. Like, do they even want, of course, if he was like an MVP candidate, of course they want that. But I'm saying, is there a part of them that's like, actually, we want to take an even further step back next year, build around Brandon Miller and Cooper Flagg? And is there a chance he just gets traded, or something like that? Like, is it possible the Hornets aren't the team for LaMelo? Does LaMelo want to be on the Hornets long term? These are things that, could he be a superstar in 3 years? Of course, but we're talking about guys we think could make the superstar leap next season. To me, that's, aside from his injury, that's the biggest potential hindrance for him is, do the Hornets just suck so bad next season that LaMelo checks out, or they just start shopping him around? And of course, as we know, it's very rare for a guy to change teams midseason and then make an all-NBA team.
Yeah, that's a good point. I just think he's going to force their hand, honestly. I think he's just going to be so good. I love that you brought up his finishing. That was really my next thing that I wanted to talk about. The guy finishes like Trae Young at the rim. Like that is basically, he's consistently in the teens in percentile efficiency at the rim, which makes no sense given that he's like 6 or 7 inches taller than Trae Young, and he has like a sick finishing package. Like, he has great layups, he has amazing touch, he has one of the best floaters in the game. Like, literally has one of the best floaters in the entire league already. So I to me, like you said, that just has to go up. I think there's no possibility for that to stay the same or get worse. It will go up. It's just a matter of how much. He's not super explosive, so I'm sure that's part of what goes into it. He's He's listed at 180 pounds, which is kind of crazy that, at 6'7". But I just believe basically on his skill and touch in that area, his finishing has to improve. As a shooter, you mentioned that he's a good shooter. I actually think he's a great shooter. I think he's already a great shooter, not even projecting forward already. He's had back-to-back seasons where he shot over 40% on catch and shoot threes. In his one really full season where he played 73 games, he shot 43% on catch and shoot threes. He also consistently shoots 35% or better on pull-ups, which is really good. For reference, Luka Doncic in the 3 years before this last one where he went completely crazy, shot about 35% from three on pull-ups. So that's 3 years consecutively that Luka Doncic shot the same 35% from three on pull-ups that LaMelo shoots. And, similar difficulty shot diet, LaMelo takes really bad and difficult shots. So to me, LaMelo is already a great shooter and potentially has the chance to be an elite 3-point shooter if he cleans up his, let's say he goes crazy and has a Luka Doncic kind of leap from pull-ups. He can definitely do that. But all he has to do is really clean up his shot diet a little bit more, given that he consistently shoots around 86% from the free throw line, and is already incredible in terms of his open free throw shooting. So to me, I hear your point about the Hornets potentially. What are they doing? How do they look to begin the season? I just think he's going to force their hand. I think we're talking about a player who already has elite impact metrics before 23, is already an elite passer before 23, already has elite finishing talent, not finishing efficiency yet, but has the talent, already has elite shooting indicators, has unique size and shiftiness, given his wingspan, his height, his speed and transition. And it's super easy to forget this. Like, this is another thing that I was looking up. He had a stretch after his rough start to begin the season across 10 games. And in those 10 games, right before he got injured, he put up 30 points per game on 49% from the field, 43% from three, to go along with 6 rebounds, 8 assists, and over 1 steal. And 2 of those games were against the Knicks. So I those are the ones that I watched like full. And he was literally unguardable. Like, I just think that this monster output, like I just said, 36 and 8 on 43% from three shooting, I think that's representative of close to where he'll eventually end up. And I just think that he's going to force the Hornets' hand. They're going to have to build around him. He's going to be the offensive engine. And in my opinion, he just definitely is going to be the next superstar in the NBA. I'll at least say he's going to be the next superstar in the NBA, in my opinion. But at the very least, he will be a superstar at some point, given health. I will bet as soon as this coming year is going to happen. But the only thing that can stop it, in my opinion, is injuries.
So I'm going to spin a similar question that you asked me earlier back to you. I feel like when you look at the East, you've got almost 2 tiers, but maybe we can call it 3 because there's kind of a middle class. Like, I would put the Hawks and the Heat in this weird middle class. And then you have the top. There's 5 or 6 teams at the top that, the Celtics are at the top of, but there's the Magic, there's the Knicks, there's the Pacers, there's the Bucks, there's the Knicks, there's the Sixers, and the Celtics. So 7 teams, and the Celtics are almost certainly number 1. And then you have the Hawks and the Heat. I think that the bottom of the East is considered very, very weak. There's the Pistons, there's the Wizards, there's the Bulls, there's the Nets. And I think most people would have put the Hornets in that group. Do you see the Hornets as more in that middle class with the Heat and the Hawks?
Yeah,
I forgot the Raptors, but yeah. Would you put the Hornets above the Raptors and with the Hawks and the Heat, or do you think they're better than the Hawks and the Heat? I mean, it sounds like you think that LaMelo would be the best player on any of those teams, maybe.
I think that I told you I'm just gonna sound crazy today. That's fine. I'm okay with that. Yeah, no, I think he's in that. I think the Hornets will be slightly below that tier. So I think there is a tier break, and the Hornets are probably in a tier alone, below the Hawks and the Heat, but above those other teams. I think they're going to have a sneaky good offense with LaMelo at the helm, and I think LaMelo, maybe not this year, but will soon be the best point guard in the East. and that is better than Brunson. That's better than Mitchell. That's better than Halliburton. I think he's going to be the best point guard in the East. I think he's going to start that ascension this year. And given that they have some pretty good spacing with Grant Williams, Seth Curry, Josh Green, who they picked up, Brandon Miller, obviously, who you just talked about. I mean, Bridges can space a little bit. I mean, he has functional spacing, as you would say.
He does.
And then I just think they have. I'm going to throw in Vasily Micic, who I've been high on, who I thought the OKC made a mistake by trading him for Gordon Hayward. That did not make sense to me. I think he's going to play real minutes and be good, and he can shoot. And then in transition, they have guys who can finish. They have Mark Williams, who we haven't seen much of, but when we have seen him on the court, he's been really, really good and shown a ton of upside. Yep. A really good pick and roll partner for LaMelo. The French kid that they brought in, I don't know how to pronounce his name, with the 6th pick, he could be a serious threat in transition as well, maybe as soon as this year. As far as transition threat, I don't think he'll do anything else. So I think they're offensively going to be really, really good. I think they're going to surprise a ton of people offensively as long as LaMelo's on the court. Defensively is going to be a problem. It's not going to be good. They're going to give up a lot of points, and so they're going to be one of these teams that scores a ton and gives up a ton. So given that, I think they'll shake out to be kind of right below that tier of teams that you mentioned in terms of the Hawks and the Heat. So I think that'll still be enough, because I think people will look at it as like, damn, LaMelo literally is just carrying this team to potentially compete, to contend for a play-in spot. And so I think that's going to even bode more well for his perception as a superstar earlier on.
Yeah, I mean, I know they don't have good depth, of course. Like, what team that isn't very good is going to have nice bench pieces? But they do have playable bench pieces. And if you look at their projected starting lineup, there's a lot of potential improvement there, and there's some solid synergy. So for those who don't know, their projected starting lineup is LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, Josh Green, Miles Bridges, and Mark Williams. Mark Williams, Josh Green, and Brandon Miller should all get better. That's what happens when you're that age. They're all really young. There's no reason not to expect them to get better. 3 of those guys can shoot. 3 of the guys playing off LaMelo can shoot. I don't think any of the non-LaMelo players are bad defenders. Mark Williams, the impact metrics love him. Say what you want about Miles Bridges, the person. The basketball player has proven to be a very, very good player when he's healthy. If you go back and look at his 2022 season before he got suspended, his 23-year-old season, an elite season by most impact metrics. There's nothing but positive signs around Brandon, but positive signs around Brandon Miller. That's a good player, and he's going to get better. Josh Green profiles as someone who should be one of those additive pieces we're always talking about. They're not going to do what Dallas was trying to do with him and try to run initiation possessions through him. He's only going to be there to shoot threes and defend, which are the 2 things he does best. So I don't know if LaMelo has the type of season you expect him to have, and they get relative good health luck around him with guys like Mark Williams, who's, as you alluded to, struggled with injuries in the past. I don't see why they can't be a play-in team, the 9 seed, the 8 seed, which they were back-to-back seasons with LaMelo Ball fully healthy. So I think that should be their expectation if LaMelo makes this leap.
100%. I expect them to be a play-in team. I expect them to push for the 8 seed, something like that. But probably settle in right around 9 or something. But I definitely think they're going to be surprising to teams because of how bad they were last year when LaMelo didn't play. And I think that he's just going to get all the credit for it. And I think it'll be deserved because, like I said, basically the argument that I've made with all of his impact metrics, with every data point that I could find about LaMelo Ball in terms of what you can use to project players in the future relative to their age, relative to how they've produced, he just has it. He has big, flashing, bright, blinding red lights in terms of what his potential is. And I think that if he's healthy, they've surrounded him with enough decent pieces that their offense can really thrive. So I think we'll see that moving forward.
Not to throw a wrench into things, but you just mentioned how bad the Hornets were without LaMelo Ball. The Wowie data, when you look at LaMelo and Mark Williams, is really interesting because it's very small samples, but the Hornets were really bad when neither played. They were okay when both played. They had a minus 2.5 net rating, which on a team like the Hornets is fine. They were really bad when LaMelo played without Mark Williams, just 430 minutes, but they lost by almost 12 points per 100 possessions. But when Mark Williams played without LaMelo, they actually won those minutes. So again, this isn't, I think the samples are so small that it's almost meaningless, but I do think there's a lot of indicating data that Mark Williams is a really helpful player.
Yeah, I think that if there was anything I would extract from those data is just that Mark Williams is probably pretty good and is a positive player, but that's pretty much the extent of what I would pull from it, just given the sample sizes. I definitely lean on the impact metrics here in terms of what LaMelo is adding, and he's super consistent across the board in terms of his offensive impact, such that I think we can be pretty much positive that he's a very, very high level offensive player already in terms of his impact, and has nowhere but up to go. So we'll see it play out. Any last thing you want to say about LaMelo or Tyrese Maxey?
No, I hope anyone who's made it to the end here can appreciate just how awesome the NBA is going to be next season. I mean, we just spent 20 minutes talking about the Hornets' best player, and the Hornets are deep in a rebuild. And they're going to be super fun to watch next season. So the NBA is just going to be an awesome product, and there's going to be a ton to talk about. And I hope that we've persuaded you not to agree with our opinions, because like XJ said to open the show, we almost aren't even interested with y'all agreeing or disagreeing with us. We're more interested in the macro theories and sort of shaping how basketball is talked about. We'd love to hear your perspectives and just have good faith discussions with y'all. So anything y'all are feeling when you listen to this, please share it with us. And we'd love to have that conversation with you about this and anything going forward.
Think about how much better, I don't know why, I'm sorry, this just came to my mind. Think about how much better the NBA is than the NFL. Like, I would literally sit there and just watch LaMelo Ball. I'll watch a Hornets against whoever. I don't even care who they're playing. Like, I'll just go to League Pass and just watch that game. It'll be sick. But, like, I don't even really want to watch, like, a Cleveland Browns versus, I don't know, Bengals. It's like, I don't really care about that. Like, or, yeah, it's just so much better.
Dude, my closest friend and one of our biggest supporters is a Browns fan. You had to choose them in your example. You had to do that.
I was thinking of a team who like should be kind of good, like kind of interesting, but like I still don't care enough about it. So that's who came to mind. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, just lay off the Browns, just any team but them. This is for the sake of hot hand theory and for shout out Jer, for the sake of my good friend Jeremy.
Fair enough.
Leave the Browns alone. Crying emoji.
fair enough. Broncos then.
Dude, that's my team.
I know. That's why I said it.
Bonus for life.
All right. Well, yeah, like you said, Geoff, this is a good conversation talking about, Maxey and LaMelo Ball and, the Sixers and the Hornets. If you have a thought, if you in the audience have a thought about who will be the next superstar, that's not Victor Wembanyama. Do not spam Victor Wembanyama below in the chat. We know, we know it's going to happen. That's inevitable. But if there's another guy that's flying below the radar, let us know who you think it is. And until
Paolo Banchero, baby.
Yes, it's coming. Paolo Banchero or Darius Garland, as you said before we started recording.
Dude, I'm not gonna what are the Cavs doing? We got to have a whole episode about that. What is their goal?
Coming soon. If there's anything you want to see Geoff and I talk about, also leave a comment about that too. We'd love to hear that as well. Until next time, this has been another Hot Hand Mini.